What if you discovered your home were made of contaminated material that was harmful to you and your family? It's a living nightmare for thousands of homeowners. Tonight, the Chinese drywall controversy. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Kathy Lewis. Imagine you've just moved into your dream home, your furniture's been delivered, your kids are in school, and all is right with the world. Well, that's the way things started out for thousands of people who discovered too late that their homes were constructed with toxic drywall imported from China. It started around 2001 and kept coming into the States until 2007. Experts say the drywall has contaminants that release gases, and these gases corrode copper, metal surfaces, and the appliances connected to them. The drywall emits strong odors that many say are making them sick. Delegate Odor says it's an absolute catastrophe.
This must have been what it felt like to have rolled up to the Louisiana Superdome after the hurricane and thought, my goodness, hasn't anybody helped these people?
Delegate Odor's heard from plenty of people like Fred Michaud, whose family was forced to abandon its home in the Hollymead neighborhood of Newport News. Michaud found Chinese drywall on all three levels of the home.
We had lots of problems in the neighborhood over the last few years, failing evaporator coils, refrigerators, televisions, computers, appliances, health issues, but you just don't come to the conclusion that your house is making you sick. So you look for other, explanations. Well, we just were not ever able to find one.
For most, the problems weren't immediate. Some say they noticed wiring problems about 2 years after construction, but some saw problems sooner.
You can see it's a very copper color there, but up here at the end, it's already started turning black.
As if the disintegration of their home were not enough, there is that overpowering smell.
Friends of ours are saying, well, we always thought your house smelled a little funny and we just never said anything to you, and so for us, we always described it as an aged wood smell, and now that we've come to recognize it, I would describe it more as a gunpowdery smell. If you've ever lit fireworks or shot a shotgun, it's that kind of pungent odor which you'll experience.
In Virginia Beach, Colleen Stevens was mystified by her symptoms.
Extreme headaches. I've had lots of CAT scans and MRIs to try to figure out what's wrong. Sinus problems, extreme fatigue, napping probably 2 or 3 hours every day. Didn't even tell anybody at that point because I was embarrassed that I had to do it, but it was horrendous.
That's when she discovered she had Chinese drywall, and her daughter's doctor said there was only one cure.
Our doctor actually told us to move out. My daughter had been sick for about 6 weeks before, and they were trying to test her for lots of different things, doing lots of blood work at that point. Then we found out we had the Chinese drywall. We went in to see the doctor, and she said to get out.
But get out doesn't solve the problem. Some homeowners are now part of a class action lawsuit, hoping the courts will help, but that's a long road. Florida Governor Charlie Crist asked FEMA for help. FEMA said since this is a product defect and not an emergency disaster, its hands are tied. Delegate Odor's bought no fewer than 3 bills in the just completed General Assembly session to help the homeowners.
My bills were focused on getting the insurance companies, the homeowners insurance companies, to have to step up and pay for the damages to these homes to help the homeowners. Those bills have been sent to an insurance bureau for further study, which study doesn't help these people. These people need relief.
Lots of people cannot afford to get out. We're lucky we got out. Fred's lucky that he got out, but there are still a ton of homeowners in Virginia that have not been able to afford to get out. Their mortgages are not being put on hold. We have a lot of mortgage companies who are ignoring this.
Senator Mark Warner has also toured Chinese drywall homes. In fact, he invited Consumer Product Safety Commission Chief Inez Tenenbaum to Hampton Roads to walk a few houses with him. Senator Warner joins us from Washington tonight. Senator Warner, thank you so much for joining us.
Kathy, thanks for having me on.
I appreciate the effort that you've made around this issue of Chinese drywall. I remember last summer you brought Inez Tenenbaum down to walk through some of these homes and to see what the situation was. And I wonder what's happened since that tour last summer.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm frustrated, but only a fraction of the frustration that the families have felt. I mean, you know, there are literally about 100 families that we're working with, mostly all on Hampton Roads in the peninsula, down in, then a number down on the south side as well. And many of these families have had to move out of their homes because of this, this odor and other things that are emitting from this drywall. It's really been a horror story, and I've been very disappointed about how slow the federal government's been moving. Now, the Consumer Product Safety Council has, and this is an issue not just in Virginia, but across the country, about a half dozen states are majorly affected. And the Consumer Product Safety Council continues to come out with these studies, but they need to show total causation so that they can try to put in place a remediation plan. They've promised the families that we would have this remediation plan by next month. I'll believe it when I see it, because this date has slipped a couple of times. In the meantime, what we've tried to do is work with all of the banks who have mortgages on these families and try to get some mortgage forbearance. I mean, it makes no sense if a family has to move out of their home, has to either rent another house or purchase another property. Of course they can't pay all the mortgages they've had on this home that's basically been made unlivable. So we're trying to, and we've got, most of the banks have worked with us to some level on mortgage modification. It doesn't solve the problem, and it doesn't put off the ultimate resolution that will have to be dealt with on these houses. We've also asked Governor McDonnell to contact FEMA to see if we can get an emergency declaration. But these families,
Governor
you know,
Christ
I saw
did that
some of them again just last weekend. It's hard.
Yeah, and Governor Christ did that in, there's a little bit of a delay, and I apologize for that. Governor Christ did that in Florida, asked FEMA to help, and FEMA said, sorry, it's not a disaster, it's not an emergency. And as you know from talking to these folks, what a lot of them are saying is, this looks an awful lot like Katrina, except it's just this house and then that one and then that one in terms of the degree of devastation. And they're saying, well, you know, causation is a great thing to find, but the government, the federal government, is the one that allowed this product in. And they're saying, look, then the federal government ought to make these folks whole. Do you buy that concept that it is a federal responsibility, or is it a responsibility of their insurance companies? Who pays on this?
Well, at the end of the day, whether this is partially federal government, partially insurance companies, partially the builders. I mean, there have been some very responsible builders down in Hampton Roads. For example, the Dragas Corporation, Helen Dragas' operation, they on their own nickel have been retrofitting a number of these homes. But somehow we've got to give some relief. I've been in these homes. I mean, I was in a home for about 35 minutes, you know, just kind of taking a tour. And I got to tell you, I had a headache for the rest of the day afterwards. So I think that, you know, what the federal government has been a bit slow on is having the scientific causation, which I don't understand why it's taken this long, but the scientific causation in place so that the Consumer Product Safety Commission can at least put a remediation plan out there about what it would take to get the house back to a livable standard. Then when you've got that, you can actually put a price frame around it. And while the homeowners are suing individually, I also think this is something that I want to continue to urge FEMA to take a fresh look at. I candidly think the United States needs to raise this issue with China. I know it's a small issue in terms of trade, but if this had been a series of faulty toys that had killed or injured hundreds of American children, you know it would be more on the front pages across the country than just this issue, which has been mostly targeted in certain select communities around America. These families are really hurting, and they need some relief.
I wonder, are you able to work, and I'm sure you've been talking with your colleagues in the Senate who are in states who are, you know, that have also been affected by this. And I wonder, because you said this next month deadline, you'll believe it when you see it in terms of that plan coming forward. What is there left to do to sort of ratchet this up for these folks who, as you note, are really struggling?
Well, you know, you feel amazing frustration. You can't believe this is happening in America, and that that there's not quicker relief. I do think, you know, they had to do a series of scientific studies. Those studies are come to an end. They were supposed to come out with the reports in March, and then by early April with the remediation plan. I mean, and this is particularly hard hit in Florida and Louisiana, Virginia, a couple of the other Gulf states. And we've just said, you know, April is the final extension, or we're going to bring Consumer Product Safety Commission back in. And they candidly have never taken on a project this big. They've spent about $3.5 million. It's a relatively small agency. This is overwhelming their capabilities as well. But, you know, end of the day, all of these answers don't go a long way if you've been put out of your home for the last 7 or 8 months and you're trying to make ends meet. So, you know, I've been pleased to see the banks help out a little bit. I think they could do more. I actually think that part of this is going to have to be dealt with the insurance companies, and it's fascinating that your homeowners insurance has almost an escape clause, it seems like, on this issue. So I think if we get federal causation proved, if we show that there's an official remediation plan, I think that both strengthens the private sector case of a lawsuit against the homeowners insurance, and it also strengthens our case with FEMA to say, hey, you guys got to help pony up at least part of these resources, because this is a tragedy.
Indeed it is. Senator Warner, I want to thank you so much for taking time to join us from Washington. Thanks. I know it's a tough day for you, so thanks very much.
Hectic time. Thank you, Kathy.
And joining us in the studio tonight to continue the conversation, Delegate Glenn Odor of the 94th District in Newport News, and also with us, Colleen Stevens, whose home you saw just a few moments ago. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for being with us. This looks like an absolutely, I don't want to say anything's intractable, but boy, that's the word you got to think of when you think about this, Glenn Odor.
I'm telling you, when I first went out to those homes, it reminded me of when I went to Franklin after the flood. I used to be the director of housing for the state of Virginia. They sent me to Franklin after the flood, and I stood in front of those homes in Franklin that were unlivable. And I had not had that same feeling until the day I was in the parking lot in December with all the people in the Hollymead subdivision, Newport News, and that same feeling of sickness came over me that these people are homeless. The problem is the Red Cross isn't here, the Department of Emergency Management isn't here, FEMA's not here, CNN isn't here, the Baptist Relief Fund isn't here. Nobody's helping them.
And I look at your home, and I see we're looking at video now of some folks going through the home and looking and testing and seeing what's going on. I look at your otherwise very beautiful home, Colleen, and I wonder, as you've devoted, literally, this is the 1-year anniversary this month of when you discovered all of this and became, over the course of that period of time, such an expert on it. I know that it's been an enormously difficult thing to go through. Are you any more hopeful now?
Actually, we're becoming less and less hopeful because we're suing our insurance companies, our builders, and China. China has never paid for any of the toxic products that have come into this country. We don't really have much hope that there's going to be any assistance. And the year that the CPSC has been working on this, they have found less information than our lawyers have in the 2 months that they've worked on it.
So it doesn't sound like you're much comforted by what's gone on in Washington with regard. And you heard Senator Warner's frustration about trying to get this thing moving with the agency. In fact, he said that is a pretty small agency, and this is the largest thing they've ever worked on. It kind of raises the question, though, about the issue of products in general coming in from overseas, because this is not the first time we've had issues with products being imported, and I guess this is one of those situations where there's a bit of a loophole, because we really don't, as Colleen says, insurance companies have been sued, builders have been sued, everybody's been sued up and down. They're all saying it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. And in fact, if it's drywall being imported from another country, it isn't them, right?
There's so much finger pointing right now, and it's like a bunch of people going to a restaurant, and the check gets delivered, and nobody wants to pick it up, because it's a big check.
There is a court case pending. We understand there may be a ruling in it, if it hasn't already happened by the time this broadcast airs, where a builder has sued the insurance company saying, you guys need to pay this. You guys need to pay this. Now, if that does not go well for the builder, in other words, if the court comes down and says the insurance company does not have to pay this, what does that mean for you?
Oh, that's devastation for us. Most of the builders will probably go bankrupt if we sue them, and they will end up not paying on what liability they have. The insurance companies are out because of the ruling, and the only person we have left then is China. In Virginia, the drywall is actually made by a company that is owned by the Chinese government. We're a little different than some of the other states. They are, in Florida, the drywall is made by a company called Knauf, which is owned by a German company. Here in Virginia, it's Taiwan, which is owned by the Chinese government.
And so why do we have so much Chinese drywall, and why is it only in certain sections of the country?
Well, it was a combination of the market was booming, after the turn of the century, but we also had several natural disasters which occurred in Florida and in the Gulf states, and so there was just an amazing building boom. And we all who have tried to move into homes before, you want to close.
You want it now.
And so imagine your builder is telling you, well, I'm having a little hard time getting drywall. You get that drywall, you get that home finished with, and he's calling up his supplier and saying, I need drywall, and the whole thing just multiplies, and so people just start finding products that maybe they haven't used before. And that's how it ended up here.
The other piece of this I think that we haven't really got a handle on yet as well is the concept of recycling, which we're all about. But if this stuff was here from 2001 to 2008 without people really being aware of what was going on with it, aren't the odds quite good that it's been recycled?
Right. I don't know that most people know that. Drywall, after it's used in a house, there's a lot of pieces left over that are sent to a recycling plant and recycled into American drywall. And now the question is, what happened with all this Chinese drywall that was recycled?
So conceivably, in that scenario, you could have a piece of drywall this big, and this part could be Chinese drywall, and the rest of it could be American drywall.
That's what we've heard.
And when you think about, and it was so touching in the tape to look at you. You've been ill. Your daughter's been ill. It's not enough really to say you've been ill. You really did not know what was going on. I wonder if you'd describe your symptoms and what that health journey was like.
For the 2 years that we lived in the house, it just got gradually worse and worse and worse. And it was more like an autoimmune disease, trying to figure out what it was.
And that's what they thought
that was affecting my neuromuscular system.
Yeah, so that's a pretty scary thing.
It was very scary.
And you didn't know what was going on.
And
of course, if you're
and
sick...
this happened to thousands of homeowners across the country.
And if you're sick, you don't feel like going out, which means you spend more time at home.
more time in the house, yes.
What happened with your daughter?
My daughter actually had strep, and when she was diagnosed with it, she took the medicine for the week. The symptoms persisted for about 6 weeks. After we found out that we had the Chinese drywall, we realized the room that she was hanging out in when she was sick was the room that had all the Chinese drywall in it. And then we went to the doctor, told them we had Chinese drywall, and they said, get out. They had tried blood work and everything and couldn't come up with anything that it was. Once we moved out of the house, she was better within the week.
Wow.
No more symptoms.
And this is an important point because different bodies react in different ways.
Yes, I actually had a conversation with a pharmacist about penicillin. And I said, some people can't take penicillin. I know that for a fact. And he said, that's true. Penicillin is a sulfur-based drug, and so not everybody can take penicillin. I said, then would it stand to reason if you had a natural allergic reaction to penicillin, would you possibly react more if you lived in a Chinese drywall home? And he thought for a second. He said, I could certainly see you making that case. So that would explain why some people might still be able to live there and some people can't live there. They just can't even tolerate it.
So, Glenn Odor, you presented a couple of bills in the General Assembly, and your colleague Senator Miller presented some on his side of the legislature. Now, what happened to those bills, and what was the conversation like around them?
Well, the part-time legislature, with legislation from across the state, they just didn't know what to do with it. And
well, especially in a year when we're facing a $4 billion budget deficit anyway.
And you had the insurance companies standing up there saying, "We don't this is a product problem, not we're not a your homeowner's insurance is not a product liability product." Now, of course, my response to that was, well, if your water heater burst and water ran all through your house, you would certainly fix that, wouldn't you? So just because your drywall is giving off a gas, what's the difference? But anyway, the best I could do was my bills got sent to some study commissions. Now, I will say this, that the governor and the Secretary of Commerce and Trade, right after they were sworn in, within weeks actually, came down to Hollymead. The Secretary of Commerce and Trade toured Hollymead in Newport News and said, at the request of the citizens, they said, we need a task force. We need a clearinghouse for all this information, and then Virginia can focus its attention. And so the Secretary of Commerce and Trade is himself chairing the defective Chinese drywall task force in the state of Virginia. I've been assigned to that. We're getting some citizens assigned to it. We're having Congressman Whitman's office is coming to it because Congressman Whitman has been putting some bills in federal government. He's going to send someone down if he himself can't come, and they're going to present. I've been on the phone with the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office is going to be at the meeting, and they're going to make presentations as to what they can do. And we're going to focus Virginia on this issue.
I appreciate that, and a clearinghouse would be helpful because it would help pull all of that information together.
Absolutely.
And so that because there's homeowners here, there's homeowners there, there's homeowners in different. There's the whole question of whatever this smell is coming out of Suffolk, and there's some people who say maybe that's a piece of that. I guess my question is, if it comes down to a situation where there has to be a lawsuit filed, one of the criticisms of the Attorney General is that he's spending a lot of time on these other issues. In fact, Dickie Cranwell, the chair of the Democratic Party, said, look, we've got people with payday loans. You know a lot about that.
Yep.
That there's other things to be worked on. Are you confident that's going to happen?
Oh, I personally talked to Attorney General Cuccinelli. Called him on his cell phone, left a message. He personally called me back, told me that he wanted to find someone in his office who was working on this. He had one of the staff people call me back. The staff person told me that the person from the previous administration who had worked on it in the past was still there, and that they would be at our meeting. And so they're on it, and I have every confidence in the world that those lawyers will go to work. If they'll sue the federal government over this, let them sue China too, and anybody else that gets in the way. We've got to help these homeowners.
Yeah.
The Louisiana Attorney General is actually suing. They're suing for the losses to the states of Louisiana.
Suing whom?
They're suing Knopf, I think, is their lawsuit.
So,
which is the drywall that's in Louisiana, the drywall company.
And that's the state that's suing on behalf of its citizens, one presumes. But boy, you know, I look at this and I hear this interview with Senator Warner, and he's saying, hope I'll get it next week, but he was next month, but he was pretty clear, I'll believe it when I see it. What other pressure can be brought to bear? Because you're still not in your home. You were actually living in another house, right?
We are.
And
unfortunately, there are some homeowners who are still in their houses. They cannot get out. And on top of that, there are homeowners who don't even know that they have it yet. Only about 100 homeowners in Virginia know that they have it, and we think it's in about 350 homes in the state of Virginia. People need to start looking into it if they think there's a funny smell in their house, and if they've been having electrical problems or AC problems, they need to look into it and get in contact with all of us.
Or health problems.
Health problems, definitely.
Yeah. And that's an important point, because we were talking about the fact that you can kind of get immune to aromas in your house. So you might want to have somebody else come in and say, do you smell anything here?
Right. Unfortunately, our friends told us after. We had olfactory fatigue. We didn't know, and now we've heard,
and that's
you know,
a real
your
deal,
clothes
by the
kind
way.
of smelled like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't know.
We didn't know.
But after you got out of the house, health improved, everything was better.
Improved, definitely. The coughs took about 2 months to go away. My two youngest daughters had a permanent cough that they tried asthma medicine for, and it wasn't helping, so we just stopped that. About 2 months after it, that was improved. Bloody noses stopped the day we moved out.
You have bloody noses
Never
too?
had a bloody nose again since we moved out of the house.
And
mine has been slow because it's been neurological.
Yeah, and you had described it in a very powerful way, I think. You said it was a headache, and how did you say
it? It was a headache that it made it feel like my brain didn't fit in my head. It didn't fit within my skull, which was then going down my back and causing neurological type problems.
Wow.
And I've heard from other homeowners that that's exactly what they felt like their headaches were.
Well,
it wasn't a migraine.
Glenn Odor, I know when you grab something, you shake it like a dog with a bone until you wrestle it to the ground, so I hope you get this one wrestled to the ground.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you for being with us and for telling us your story. We really, really wish you well, particularly after the kind of year you've had. I just hope things start to turn around here, and that we get some movement on this issue, because it is a tragedy any way you slice it. I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. Most people in a recent poll gave corporate executives a D or an F for honesty and ethics. And who can blame them in the face of bloated bonuses, shoddy performance, and acute accountability avoidance? But if Helen Dragas were on the list of executives in question, she probably would have single-handedly brought up the grade point average. Dragas is the president and chief executive officer of the Dragas Companies, a Virginia Beach real estate development firm that long ago decided to focus its energy on first-time home buyers. Finding a niche and sticking with it has paid off handsomely. Dragas leaves its competitors in the dust. But when Helen Dragas discovered that Chinese Drywall was in 73 of her condo units, she could easily have shrugged her shoulders and waited for the courts to sort out who gets to foot the bill. But she didn't do that. Instead, she solved the problem for her customers, those very same scared, anxious, first-time home buyers. Dragas initiated remediation, paid to house those homeowners while they were out of their homes, and simultaneously sued her insurer in federal court. The point is, she didn't leave people who trusted her holding the bag. And there's a reason that Dragas was in a position to help her homeowners. The company has almost no debt at last count, and a disciplined investment policy that kept it from getting swept up in the real estate madness of a few years back. So it had the money to do the right thing. But there's another reason that goes deeper than the balance sheet. It goes to the DNA of decency and service. Helen Dragas learned that at the knee of her father, George Dragas, the son of Greek immigrants who barely survived the Nazi occupation of Greece, who went to work when his father died, leaving his mother to raise 4 children on a seamstress's salary. Today, George Dragas' daughter is the president of a multi-million-dollar firm, a wife, a mother, a benefactor for the homeless, an advocate for workforce housing, and what may be most shocking of all, giving recent headlines, a responsible, accountable corporate citizen. To watch tonight's program again or any of our other past shows, just visit us on our website, whatmatters.tv. That's where you are welcome to drop us an email or sign up for our weekly newsletter. We'll also let you know what we're working on in the weeks to come. And weekdays at noon, I hope you'll also join us or call into the radio program Hearsay. That's on 89.5 WHRV. We hope you find some great conversation there as well. Thanks for watching. I'm Kathy Lewis, and we'll see you next time for another look at What Matters.